Hello everybody. Hey, this is take 2 on this one. I don't know what happened on the first recording, and I apologize that the sound went kaflooey. So let's do it again. And as you may have noticed in the announcement section on Carmen, I have delayed the database posting for 1 week as a result of the snafu here with the sound on this video. So, and I know some of you already turned it in, but for the rest of you who have not yet, well, okay, so you get a break. Anyway, let's move on with stress and emotion. Again, we're doing the OHIO pose, and this time we're not only getting diverse, but we're going cross-species, so I think that's pretty freaking awesome. Oh boy, we have some cat conflagration here. Let's talk about the human stress response. Perceived threat activates thoughts, feelings, behaviors. It's the big four, really, of the stress response that normally promote adaptation and survival, and that's the point of the stress response. It's to kick us into high gear to make us more effective in the face of a threat and enhances our survivability. Our stress response is essentially a product of short-term encounters, and where we run into problems in modern humans is that we often have long-term stressors, and the system is really far better and far healthier dealing with short-term stressors. Let's talk a little bit about how it works. And if you've been in psych of adjustment, you've seen this model as well. I love this model, and it kind of sums it up. But two really important aspects here is the cognitive appraisal. So these two cognitive appraisals, we appraise when we encounter a stressor. The first thing we have to do is determine the nature of the stressor. What's the type? Is it environmental, psychological, social? And then we're going to assess the dimensions. Is this long-term, short-term? And that would be the duration. How bad is it, right? Is it worth me even thinking about, or can I just kind of shrug it off? That would deal with the intensity. How often does it come? And that's something that we probably know. If it's a rent and we have a hard time making a rent, on a monthly basis, well, then the rate, right? And then that would also be predictable because it comes every month. But what about those unpredictable occurrences? Your car's broken into, you don't have insurance to cover theft on your car, your laptop was stolen, and so you assess the nature of the stressor, and that's the cognitive appraisal. And some people call that the primary appraisal. Is the appraisal of the stressor itself. Now, when it comes to a stressor, that activates also a secondary appraisal. It's another cognitive appraisal, but usually comes second, right? Hence secondary. So, and it's the assessment of the resources I have to deal with the stressor. So you can see that if these two kind of balance out, the quality of the stressor, right, but the resources match it well enough, then the possible reactions coming off of here can be relatively minor. And notice the physical responses, the behavioral, the subjective feelings, that's kind of the emotion, and then the cognitive, what we think about it. We are kind of at the center of this model, though, and that's us. This is the person, right? And it shows our physiological characteristics, and these things make a difference in how we approach stress. Physical health. If I'm healthy, right, then all else being equal, I'm better off when I encounter a stressor. But if I have to, let's say, get a new job where I have to work outside in the rain, like when I worked in Oregon in construction, it was pretty nasty. I mean, it rains, it snows, it's cold, you start at 6 a.m., you finish maybe at 5 or 6 p.m. every day. I mean, and it'll wear you down. And if you become sick, if you're not physically healthy, that job will kill you, and it becomes extremely stressful, right? And then there's psychological characteristics like your mental health, your temperament, self-concept, right? Who do you believe yourself to be? And a part of that is self-efficacy. To what extent do you believe that you can handle the stressor? Self-efficacy being the assessment of your ability, so to speak. And then cultural characteristics, and this is the large, culture is that large hidden aspect of our life. We often don't know directly how it influences us, or at least not aware of it in the moment. But it's these pieces all together, the stressor itself, the resources, but what we think about it becomes all important. And we can see that with qualities like emotional intelligence can do a lot to buffer our response to stress. because we react to it differently under those circumstances. We appraise it differently. Now, chronic stressors then are the stressors that arise from our social environment. I'm going to go down the list here, see what you think. Do any of these provide you with a certain level of stress? Work. Anyone become stressed about work? I know a lot of you do, because I've read a lot of your papers, your kindness experience papers and sake of adjustment, right? I read about what you go through at work, etc., and how you have to deal with people that probably are not the nicest people in the world, but you put on your game face and you do your job, right? Or you have to balance work and familial responsibilities. Does anyone find their family, at least in part, stressful? And note, this can also extend to roommates as well, because let's face it, if you're living together, then that's kind of the same ballpark. Nobody here finds school stressful, do they? Or maybe you do. I don't know. So, and notice when you combine work and school, like us professors, etc., double the stress for double the fun and half the money, if you will. Does anyone find money stressful? And then, relationships. Stressful? On a good day, not so much, maybe, but on a bad day, nothing can be worse than the stress that is evoked by a relationship gone south. How about uncertainty? How many of you, man, really like to know what's ahead, what's coming at you? Uncertainty kind of skeezes you out. Well, human beings, for the most part, don't necessarily like uncertainty unless it's planned uncertainty, that we're kind of trying trick or scare ourselves. And then expectations. And expectations are really kind of a double-edged whammy on us. Think about it. If I have expectations for someone else's performance, I might be stressed out that they're not going to meet those expectations. But the flip side is, if people put expectations on me, then I may be concerned that I'm not going to live up to their expectations. So expectations have a way to be, stressful going either direction. Pretty nasty. Now, let's focus in on job stress just for a minute. Job stress results when the requirements of the job don't match the capabilities, resources, or needs of the worker. And let's face it, employment-wise, we're continually getting screwed over. How many of you have heard at your work, and I was told this in our own department, psychology department here at Ohio State, well, you're just going to have to do more with less. And most of us are like, well, that's really awesome because my plate wasn't quite full enough. So now we're going to fill my plate to a greater extent, and we're going to make sure I have even fewer resources. Right? So, awesome, right? And that's so much the case everywhere we go, and it really is, well, I got more to say that in organizational psychology, but it's not appropriate here. Is it, Annika? So, we're going to move on here. Miss 2 of 7, that's her full name is Annika 2 of 7, right? She's a Borg kitty, so if you're a Star Trek fan, you might know what I'm talking about. NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, right, tells us in their publications about the effects of potential effects of stress, and as we see in this model, it's a pretty simple model, right? Not the most elaborate ever. Stressful job conditions, here they come at us, right? And this is your individual and situational factors. So this is about you, like we talked about in that model, and situational factors could also comprise resources that you have to deal with the stressor and the nature of the stressor. Here come the stressful job conditions, right? To what extent does it affect us and how? Well, the appraisal in the previous slide kind of gets at that, but take-home point from the NIOSH model is that when we undergo increasing levels of stress, we can see our immune system compromised, so we're more susceptible to illness and we're more likely to be involved in an accident. And that's one that people don't necessarily talk about. And there's a couple reasons for this, but primarily stress can serve as a tremendous distractor. And if we're distracted, then we aren't paying attention to the same level, and it's it's easier to be hurt on the job, right? So, risk of injury and illness, and they have some pretty good data on that. So, the individual and situational factors that were at the bottom of that little NIOSH box there, they can help reduce the effects of stressful working conditions. So to the extent that you have a balance between work and family or personal life, and for many of us, who now are working at home, how we manage this, because now what we're doing is bringing our workplace stress into our home, and how the hell do we keep it from consuming us to 24/7, right? So a lot of us have little gimmicks that we can kind of, use to kind of ameliorate the effects of the stress. My wife, works for Nationwide Insurance. She's paralegal, and she works from home. And she's worked from home for years now. She's got an office down below me on the second floor there, and that's all it is. That room is an office. We have the luxury of having a couple extra rooms in the house, right? It's just the two of us. So that is her office. And the office door remains closed. So she's in there, the office door is closed. And if she's not in there, the office door is closed. So she works when she's in there, and then let's not work when we're not in there. Now, me, it's a little more complicated. I'm up here in the attic, which is also our master bedroom, so I am working hard to try and take a day off every week this semester. Just one day, nothing. Or come 5 p.m., nothing. Now, the one exception to that might be answering some of your emails, because I know some of that can be kind of mission critical. So I don't necessarily take a day off from email, but all other types of work, right? And it's not always necessarily the same day. I got to adapt. I got to be flexible, see what's coming at you and see what's coming at me, and make a decision there. So there's got to be some kind of balance to help ameliorate that stress, right, Penelope? So a support network of friends and coworkers. And let's see, today's Thursday. 2 days ago we had our lecture Zoom meeting, and I can't tell you how good I feel at the end of that meeting. Because I've been able to spend that time with my colleagues, sharing our experiences, our trials, tribulations, etc. Friends help ameliorate this as well. Okay? So take a relaxed and positive outlook, and that's often much easier said than done. Right? Well, just put a smile on and it'll be okay. It's like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. It depends on the level, the nature of the stressor, and so many other kind of aspects in our life. But simple list from NIOSH. Thank you, NIOSH. Let us then consider a couple that are non-NIOSH recommendations, come more from me and my kind of life experience, if you will. Also, being a social psychologist, we learn a couple things here and there, believe it or not. Right? This one, I'm going to pull this one from my dad, but there's other people, Gilovich, etc. There's research to support this. Perspective taking, long-term orientation. My dad passed away in '96, but before that, he and I were pretty tight, although, we lived 1,000 miles apart for a good time when I was in Salem or when I was in Washington, and he was still down in Orange County, living there in Anaheim. But, there's times when I call my dad, and usually 2 times I could be counted on to call my dad is one, when something cool was happening and I wanted to share with him, but then when something bad was happening and I wanted to get advice, right? And his advice usually wound up towards the end of the conversation after we talked it through quite a bit, and he says, ultimately, Mark, tutto passa. And what does that mean? Well, if you know you're Italian, you're done already. You got it, right? But he was an Italian American, right? He's first generation American from an Italian family. Tutto passa means this will pass, and most things do pass with time, right? So what looks horrible now, in time might not look so bad. Not a guarantee, but a possibility, right, sweetie? All right, you're showing off this morning. So the other one, this comes straight to us from the social psychologist, downward social comparisons, but there's a lot of religious references to this way prior to social psychology. You ever hear this, the saying, I was complaining about having no shoes until I met a man with no feet. And when you see someone whose situation, their plight is worse than yours, it's often, I know, horribly uplifting for you, because you can say, well, at least I don't have it as bad as they do, right? But this is not a great way to go to life, just comparing yourself to those less fortunate and then feeling good about yourself. In fact, that can backfire in short order. I want to talk then about the NIOSH model and the illness. Let's talk a little bit about then immunosuppression. And we're going to have an honest God flowchart here, so here we go. We're going to start with the stimulus. That's going to be our starting point. So we see some stimulus in the environment, and notice I've asked you in one assignment to actually name a stimulus and how it impacts you. And this is kind of in conjunction with this model. Right? So we see a stimulus. Let's perceive it as a threat, right? And that's the appraisal process. So that was the primary appraisal. And then it says, this appraisal says, oh my God, that's a stressor. And the stress response is designed to instigate fight or flight, right? Depending on the secondary appraisal. Should I flee or should I fight really is in part of who I am and what resources are available to me. So am I going to stand up to this, right? Do I have the strength, or is it better to get the hell out of Dodge and live to see another day? But either way, this is the natural order of things. When we perceive a threat, then it activates the fight or flight. Now, what does that mean? What does that do? Well, it releases a bunch of hormones. So we see adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, oxytocin, and oxytocin is a new addition to this list. The beautiful thing about science is we're going to learn that even more happens than this as science progresses. Now, what is the purpose of the glands in our body releasing these hormones? Well, these hormones then physically prepare us for the stressor. So our heart rate goes up, pumps more blood, right? That makes more blood, more oxygen available to our muscles. Respiration increases, so we're getting more oxygen to oxygenate that blood. Fats and glucose can be burned, right, to facilitate energetic responding. Now, the weird one here that's somewhat inconsistent is blood flow, plus or minus. What the heck does that mean? It means that the body's making some careful decisions about where it sends the blood. Blood flow will be increased to the limbs, right? So you want the power that the limbs, in case you're fighting or flighting, if you will, run like the wind, Forrest, right? Or fight the good fight, whatever it is, we need the blood to our muscles, and that's basically to our limbs. Now, what that means is the body is saying you don't need blood in your core to the same extent, so it reduces the blood flow to your core. Now, notice this means your stomach, this means your genitals, this means all these areas that are not going to function as well under chronic stress because they're being robbed of blood flow because the body's making the decision to push it to the limbs. Okay? Perspiration. Well, we are an interesting animal in that we perspire to cool ourselves off. It's a very effective means of cooling ourselves off. Think about it. Most mammals have to pant, and that is they're doing the respiration. They're ridding themselves of the heat through panting. We get to perspire. It was an adaptation that was way back in our lineage, and it's relatively successful for us. Okay. Now, the immune system, and this is the point. This is the big point. Is the immune system is being suppressed because it's not necessary to fight infection at this point in time. It's to fight the stressor. So the immune system takes a holiday to a certain extent. But when the immune system is being diminished in its performance, it makes us more ripe for contracting disease, infection. So here is the decision point represented by a diamond. Did the threat subside? That is, did I run away? Have I beaten the threat into the pavement, right? Am I now safe? And if we say, no, the threat is still here, it's still ongoing, then what happens? We release more of the hormones to cause further effect in the body until we get the good message. Now notice, this is a loop, and this is the chronic stress loop. So under chronic stress, it's no. And at some point, this system becomes exhausted, right? Now, let's suppose it's good news. The threat subsided. Yes, we got it done. Then the acetylcholine hormone is released, the neurotransmitter, and what happens there? All the threat hormone levels are reduced, and this is the parasympathetic nervous system in operation, reducing the threat hormone levels, bringing the body back into balance, and there we go, the body returns to normal. Questions about that? It's a straightforward model. If we move through it, you can see it's obviously it's a flow chart. It's linear except for the one loop in there. Let's go then and take a look at another one. So let's take a closer look at what's going on in these ancient areas of our brain. And so the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, where are we? We're in the limbic system, right? And that's ancient part of the brain there. So we have a stressful event, and who's doing the hard work in responding to the stressful event? It's the amygdala. And notice the amygdala has the potential to respond non-consciously to perceived threat, even before we're aware of it. And it's a nice adaptation because it gives us super fast responding. Problem is that we can be fooled, the amygdala can be fooled, but it doesn't know that, so it's still responding to a stressor, right? What's the difference between a plastic snake and a real snake? To the amygdala, same diff, right? So they're both going to cause the immediate, non-conscious, super fast stress response. That activates the hypothalamus, right? Electrochemical signals going down to pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is then kicking out the adrenal cortical tropic hormone ACTH to the adrenal glands, and that's what's releasing cortisol into the bloodstream. So that's suppressing the immune system but preparing the body for fight or flight. So you can see how the limbic system is the area that's implicated in this process. Okay. So it's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis that's really about the stress response. Okay, I'm going to stop here briefly, and we're going to come back for part 2. We're still going to be in the HPA, but we're going to talk a little more specifically about what's going on, and that's going to be the lead into our assignment.